Welcome to Mission Imperfect, the podcast about finding your own path, your own way, and embracing the imperfection of the journey.
We're your hosts, life coaches, former HR professionals, and mums, Kirsty and Catherine.
We love to discuss the topics that come up time and time again for our coaching clients and which affect us all, from things like acceptance and boundaries to values and well-being and everything in between.
Each episode ends with a question for you and us to reflect on. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to grab a cuppa and a biscuit and join us in getting lost in finding ourselves.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Mission Imperfect. Today we are talking about judgment or no judgment. Kirsty, over to you. This was your idea. Tell us a little bit about why you chose this topic.
Well, judgment can be a really positive thing, can't it? Judgment can be well considered and balanced and healthy. But that's not what we're going to talk about, because where's the fun in that?
Exactly.
Um, you hear a lot of people say, no judgment, or I'm judgment free or whatever. And I think that's the kind of judgment or lack of judgment, perceived lack of judgment, that is actually a lot more unhealthy and potentially damaging than actual recognized judgment. I think that was almost a coherent sentence, but I'm probably wrong. Did it make any sense?
So, do you mean a little bit like, when people say things like, well, don't want to cause any offense, but, and then of course that's almost like a precursor to say something that might be offensive. So it'd be like
Exactly.
when they no judgment here, and then actually what comes out is possibly loaded with some judgment.
Yes, I think that's it. And my son went through a phase when he was younger of saying, no offense, but, and it was, you
Yeah.
know what? If you have to preface something with no offense, you know damn well it's offensive. And
Mm.
well, yeah. So just be honest about it. And perhaps yes, thank you. That is it, isn't it? When people say, oh, I'm judgment free, there's no judgment here, very often it's quite the opposite, isn't it? And can you even be judgment free?
Well, that's a
Is
really good question because I was just thinking about that. If there's no, when is it judgment and when is it perhaps an opinion or a view or a stance on something? It's difficult, isn't it? I think, and perhaps we'll go on to talk a little bit more about this, about what we mean by that kind of negative judgment, where perhaps
yeah.
you might be, let's put a pre in front of it, you're almost making perhaps some assumptions, like prejudging something because of,
Yes.
I don't know, your own biases or whatever it might be.
The whole first impressions thing, I mean, that is a judgment that I firmly believe we all make all
Yeah.
the time, and that there is no criticism in that at all. It's completely natural. Based on our own experiences and knowledge and values and everything else, and beliefs and opinions, we are going to have that sort of shortcut programming that allows us to, well, it started out fundamentally as determining whether something is a danger or not. Is it friend or foe? And so the way we've lived so far and what we've experienced is going to shape how we react to the next person that we see, the next event we experience. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's totally natural. But it's the failure to recognize that you're doing it. If you believe you don't judge, you don't see that happening, and you can't make allowances for it. You can't call yourself on it and say, hang on, where's that come from? I mean, a really generic example could be, you have a bad time in a relationship and suddenly all men are bastards.
Yeah.
The minute you hear about, some kind of relationship breakup or problem, you find yourself inclined to favor one party or the other based on the fact that one person may have been behaved in a way your ex did, or the gender of the person is the same as yours, or the person who upset you. All sorts of things like that that we hardly realize we're doing. And if you refuse to admit that there's a possibility that you're judging, you're never going to admit that you're doing it or notice it and be able to straighten it out.
Yeah. Or perhaps even admit that you were wrong, because you're coming from that Yes, I
Wrong.
know, I know. It's a horrible thing to do to have to be, isn't it? None of us like to do it, but yeah, it's there is a danger that you'll because you don't see it, you don't recognize it, you've already perhaps accepted that as the truth. You don't entertain the fact that you might actually be wrong. Yeah, so using that example, it's a really good one. You have a bad relationship experience and you then sort of tar everyone with the same brush. That's the expression, isn't it? It's you
Yeah,
have that judgment of people moving forward. So it's tricky, isn't it? Because we like to look for clues, don't we? We like to and we
of
like to have
course.
evidence
Yeah,
as well. But sometimes we are going to back up what we think we know, and we look for the evidence to support it as well. So it becomes like this self-fulfilling prophecy, doesn't it? Of well, I knew it was going to go wrong because X, Y, Z. You know, you've looked for the evidence, but we've got a little bit disconnected from facts and we're being led by the emotions, aren't we? And we're connecting it and projecting it into the new situations and perhaps
yeah,
unfairly.
yeah. And I mean, yeah, sometimes it is a case of being disconnected from the facts. Sometimes it is that your judgment may be based on the facts of your own situation, but that was only one situation,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
judgment can only really apply to that situation. It doesn't mean that everybody else's not identical situation is the same and can be sort of processed in the same way or, you know, viewed in the same way.
Yeah. So it's actually quite hard to be judgment free then. I think that's what we're effectively saying.
I think so. And I think there's another area where judgment creeps in. And this, when I first heard this, it felt really counterintuitive. We judge people to make ourselves feel better when we feel insecure and self-critical. And that took me a while to get my head round. But if you are feeling really bad about an aspect of yourself or something you're doing or perhaps not doing or whatever, you you will be inclined to judge other people more harshly in order to make you feel that you are not as bad as you think you are.
Yeah. I know what you mean. Like you don't want to be on your own being rubbish.
Yeah, the ego does not want to think that you are a complete waste of space. That's you cannot destroy your ego. And if you get to that sort of point of thinking, I am the lowest of the low, I am completely worthless, I'm no good at anything, whatever, the ego is going to resist that, and rightly so.
Mm.
And so the way your mind sort of reacts to that is to go, well, that person's doing something bad, which I'm not.
Yeah.
It could be, I don't know, parenting, I think, is a prime example. Maybe this is just me. Um, but I know when my son was younger, I would feel bad about all sorts of things that I felt that I wasn't doing or wasn't doing right. What I might be feeding him. Was it the most healthy, home cooked, vitamin-filled diet possible? No, it wasn't. And I knew that. And I would get very judgmental of people who were doing really well on the feeding front. And I would latch on to stuff that I felt I was doing okay on that they weren't. Like, well, okay, so their kids have five vegetables with every meal, but they go to bed really late. Mine doesn't. How petty can you get? But that kind of judgment will creep in to try and protect ourselves when we're being really
Yeah.
self-critical, failing to accept ourselves.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Think two things to say about that. One is that parenting is such ripe ground for us to feel that we're not doing a brilliant job. So, and also that there is a bit of a natural tendency to compare, isn't it? Because perhaps you've met other people during your journey into parenthood and you look at the milestones and all those things. So yeah, there is natural grounds to make those comparisons.
Hmm.
But then the other thing I was going to mention is that the judgment there almost is a bit of a self-preservation, isn't it? It's like, well, I'm finding this hard and then nailing it in this area, but at least they're finding it hard in another area. So I don't feel quite so bad anymore.
Yes,
It's a bit like that, really, isn't it? Which
yeah,
is a very
absolutely.
human thing to do.
Yeah, and I think body image is another area where it crops up a lot. If you're
Mm.
feeling really insecure about your own appearance, your looks and your body, then you will get really critical of other people. And it's not a nice thing to spot in yourself or to feel that you're doing. But I think it's
Yeah.
quite a natural thing that many of us will tend to do. It could be, no, I feel really fat and I know I'm fat. I know I'm overweight, but at least I'm not that big.
Yeah. It's such a shame that when you were talking about first appearances earlier, and making judgments, because it's hard not to just see someone and have some kind of thought about them, like, oh, I wonder what they do, or what their job is, or whatever it might be, and you might
Yeah,
make some kind of assumption from, are they wearing a suit, for example? So I think maybe they're a lawyer, or do you know what I mean? Like really stereotypical type views. But yeah, we can make judgments, or maybe you can say that actually I'm just making a guess, and but then you might be surprised when they say something completely different, and it just goes to show we get used to thinking a certain way potentially about people, and we're not always right. So I think it is very hard to be judgment free, isn't it?
definitely. I I would go so far as to say I think it's impossible.
Yeah, I think I agree.
I mean, maybe if you've achieved major spiritual enlightenment, I don't know if you're the Buddha or Jesus or something, maybe you can do it. But I suspect that for 99.999% of humanity,
Mm,
we are going to judge, and it's a natural thing to do, and it's not a criticism, and it's not something to feel bad about. It's something to be aware of. So we keep going back to, isn't it? Awareness.
yeah, awareness. Yeah,
Yeah. And yeah, you have to form some kind of first impression of somebody.
yeah.
Something
Well,
has to
you're
happen.
forming a connection, aren't you? You what you're
Yeah,
effectively doing is trying to say, well, how do I relate to this person? And if I don't know, I'm going to plug that gap with what I think it might be. So that's where potentially that judgment comes in, certainly to begin with. And sometimes we're
yeah.
actually encouraged to judge, aren't we? We just talked about that phrase, when people say no offense, but, or no judgment, but, we think, well, actually, no, it's not quite what it means. But there are other phrases. And one that came to my mind was, oh, I think I'm a good judge of character. You hear that said. And I think I've even said that about myself before. And actually, what am I actually saying? That I assess people
Mm.
and assume things about them? Or, I mean, to be fair, I'd like to think that more comes over time rather than an immediate thing like, oh, I've sussed that person out in the first 60 seconds of meeting them. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's interesting because what are we actually basing that good judge and a good judge of character according to me? Who's to say that my assessment of what a good character is what
Yeah.
anyone else's is?
And what matters to you in a character might not be what matters to somebody else.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I like we said around that it's not about forming that judgment or making that judgment and sticking to it within the first 60 seconds. Yes, all of us will have some form of judgment, first impressions pop up about somebody in the first 60 seconds. But if you're going to say, I am a good judge of character, therefore that is what I think of this person and I'm right,
Yeah. Yeah.
that is potentially problematic. Whereas saying, okay, in this first minute meeting them, I have some impressions here. I wonder how valid they are. And you, with that open mind, you continue in to get to know that person. Then you probably do form good judgments. And they don't have to be static, do they? They can change over time.
Yes. Exactly that, Kirsty. That's exactly what I do. Thanks for letting me off the hook for saying that I was a good
You're an
judge of character.
excellent, you're an excellent judge of character, Catherine. Yeah, I think we agree on that. Yes. And yeah, that willingness to question your judgments is vital, isn't it? I mean, we have to have a biscuit reference, don't we? It's mission
Yes,
imperative. We have to have a
absolutely.
biscuit reference. So I think, for me, something that might come up is I have just judged this person as a completely selfish arsehole because they took the last biscuit. I would make that judgment.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, me too.
then I can question it and adjudge it. Adjudge it? That's not a word. I can question it and challenge it. I don't even know what I meant with that. By asking myself a question like, did they perhaps think I genuinely meant it when I offered it to them?
You offer it through gritted teeth. I mean, did you make it obvious it wasn't a genuine offer, Kirsty? That's the question.
I probably did, to be fair, but
Yeah,
so maybe they are just a selfish asshole. But it, like what you're saying, it's that willingness to recognize that you are making the judgment and then to challenge that judgment.
yeah,
And yeah, maybe you'll go, you know what, I was right. I stand by it. Fair enough. But to not challenge it is where the problems creep in. And what is it you're basing that judgment on, and how fair is it? And fair is a difficult word, perhaps, but we all have our own kind of little, radar around what's fair and not. And I think just asking yourself that question, am I being fair?
yeah,
Probably highlight if you've made a snap judgment based on perhaps one previous situation or one unfortunate thing that happened to you with somebody a bit like this person, or somebody who spoke like they did, or somebody else who took the last biscuit, and will help you see things differently.
yeah. And as you quite rightly said when we were discussing this, is there is also the context, isn't there, of that, for example, were you particularly hungry when they took that last biscuit? Had it been a particularly bad day and that biscuit was, that bit of salvation at the end of it, that's a slightly different kettle of fish to I actually have another packet in the cupboard. So I know we're playing light here about the biscuit references, but actually things like our mood, what's going on for us, the other factors at
Mm,
play, they will influence the judgment. So that is
that's a really
something
good
else
point.
just to
Yeah.
be aware of, because our if we've got a sort of barometer in the middle where it's our sort of more stable zone, we might feel more comfortable and confident in
Mm,
our judgments, but we can all waver from that according to the situation and the context, but we may not be aware of that at the time. And I had my own experience of that just this week. I had a bit of a crappy afternoon and I was ratty and I knew it, so I actually got rattier than I intended to with someone else. I thought, actually, I now know that that just wasn't really fair of me. But you don't always see it when you're in it, do you? Often see these things afterwards.
absolutely. Funny enough, I had a similar situation this week. I was tired and some buttons got pushed, and my judgment of somebody's behavior, I can honestly admit afterwards was harsher than it needed to be. And maybe that's the point. Maybe not needing to be right about someone helps us to be less wrong about them. And let's get political in this Trump era. Admitting you're wrong is not exactly encouraged.
Mm.
But maybe that's the way you learn to grow.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you're hungry and you're tired, then the way you assess somebody is going to be pretty different to when you're feeling full of beans and in a good mood and, just had a biscuit.
I think what we're ultimately saying, the answer to most things in life might be a biscuit. I don't know. Maybe that could be an episode.
Oh my God, it's the new spiritual enlightenment. The answer is the biscuit. You're welcome,
The biscuit.
folks. That's all from us.
Well, actually, no, steady on. We have to talk about what type of biscuit and so on. But before we go completely down a biscuit rabbit hole, because we might have said that word nearly as many times as judgment this episode, let's get slightly back on track. Let's share some quotes, shall we? Unless there's
Why
anything
not?
else you wanted to talk about the judgment part itself. I think what we're really saying is be mindful of it, the fact that it is probably there. We don't necessarily want to admit that we are being judgmental if we're talking about it in that kind of more negative light, but we're saying that it is natural to have that. And if we're really honest, where we tend to point it a lot is at ourselves. Maybe we'll talk about that in another episode, because I think we are our own harshest critics. We've probably covered it in different guises under other episodes, haven't we? But it's normal for it to
Yeah.
be there, is what we're saying.
Yeah. And being so harsh on ourselves can drive us to be harsh on other people too.
Yeah,
So it all
yeah,
comes back to being kinder to yourself, getting to know and
yeah.
like yourself.
Well, you've led that perfectly onto this first quote, Kirsty. I'm sure you did that intentionally.
Of course, it perfectly planned. Um, yeah, this one is unattributed or unattributable. That's quite a hard word to say, I've just discovered. Uh,
Mm,
Judging a person does not define who they are, it defines who you are. Apart from
yeah,
biscuits, they've just summed it up beautifully, haven't they?
they have. They really have.
Were you going? Were you going to reference the Brené Brown quote? Because that's the one I was just going for.
Go for it. Go for it. I'll do the other
Yeah.
one.
Yeah. So she says, if I feel good about my parenting, I have no interest in judging other people's choices. If I feel good about my body, I don't go around making fun of other people's weight or appearance. We're hard on each other because we're using each other as a launching pad out of our own perceived deficiency.
Oh, wow.
Whoa.
Well, she says things so well, doesn't she?
She says, I mean, she could potentially mention biscuits a bit more, but other than that, she's quite good, isn't she?
I need to send you a packet of biscuits, Kirsty. Are they missing in the house at the moment?
I say, like I say, it's been a long week and it's only
Yeah.
Wednesday. There we go.
It's only Wednesday. Well, the both of us mistook it for another day. Yeah.
Yes.
One of those weeks, isn't it? And finally, we have you. You haven't walked in my boots, so how are you going to judge me? By Aaron Neville, and I
Mm,
think that's just quite a good understanding. We don't have all the context, do we? We never do, actually. Um,
no, we can never quite know what's going on for somebody else. However superficially similar their situation might seem to something we have experienced, it's never going to be the same, is it?
yeah. Actually, I've just seen you've got a couple others. Sorry, I didn't notice we had two more. And they're both quite good, valid ones. I'll pinch one of them, and I love this one. Everyone else is too busy judging themselves to be thinking badly of you, by Darren Hayes. Now, we might have tried to sort of dispute that actually we think people might be judging a little bit, but it just does go back to that fact that we think people are
Mm,
often more consumed with their own issues and problems and judgments of themselves to really be that concerned about other people.
yeah, and as you said that, it occurs to me we do make a lot of judgments about people all the time. So we are thinking badly of people, but how much does that stick? How many
Yeah, like
of the
maybe
judgments
fleeting.
you make of other people do you actually remember the next day? The people you
Yeah,
pass in the street and maybe think something critical of their appearance, whatever. Do you remember that the next day? Do you remember it 10 minutes later? It's so ephemeral, the way other people think about you. But anyway, a question. There is always a question. So, what do you notice about yourself when you're being hardest on other people?
yeah, that's a good question. So I thought, oh, she's putting us right on the spot here. Um, and it's funny because I like to think that I try not to be too hard on other people, but of course I'm human, so therefore I do fall into this trap. And I think I know it says more about me than it does
Mm.
about them because this is my judgment, my assessment. What am I thinking? And so I try to catch it because why am I bothering myself with this? Why am I bothering myself with what someone else is doing? Um, and
Yeah.
an example I thought of is it might mean they've done something that I want to do, but I'm being a scaredy cat about doing it. So what it really means, underneath all that, is a little bit of jealousy. That's really what it
Oh.
means. Potentially, yeah, that's the example that came up to me. Um, but and if it's not that, if it's not something that I want or I'm interested in, then really it's not my business. So yeah, I'm going to try and remember all of this for the next time it pops up. What about you?
Yeah, but being able to notice that can make a difference, can't it? Not
Mm,
dissimilar, really. I think when I'm being hardest on other people, I am usually feeling very down about myself in some way. Bad about something I've done, or maybe not done, not done well enough. Um, and from what you just said about if somebody's done something you actually want to, then yeah, if somebody else has done something that I've not yet been brave enough to do myself, I I might find myself criticizing how they've done it or questioning their motives for it rather than just being able to celebrate
yeah,
their doing of it. And that's not a nice thing to notice about yourself, but it's very telling, I think. And when you talk about the body barometer, which is a phrase I really like and that I realize I've started using as a reference point, so thank you for that. I've become very aware I get a lot of tension in my jaw, one side of my jaw and neck when I'm being particularly judgmental. You know how your brain sometimes goes into
Oh,
overdrive
yeah.
and you're thinking without really being all that conscious, and then I'll be aware of this sort of tension and realize what kind of thinking I'm doing, and generally that it's not terribly nice. And it's not necessarily always completely unfair, but it's, it's a bit unnecessary.
Mm. Well, it's helpful that your body has given you
Yeah.
a cue there. Be interested to know if anyone else experiences that.
And I can notice it when I'm being very hard on myself too. So it's not just on others, it's when I'm being
Yeah,
judgmental,
yeah.
full stop,
Mm.
whether it's self or others. So there you go. That's your question for this week, people. What do you notice about yourself when you're being hardest on other people?
Yeah. And if anyone else has a body barometer response, do let us know in the comments. We'd be
Yeah.
really interested to see what they when if they're in a common place. That'd be interesting too.
Oh, it would, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So I don't know about you, but I tend to associate certain parts of the body with certain emotions, but I don't know if that is just me. So it'd be interesting to see if there's common answers, like, when you have like something disappointing and I kind of feel it in my stomach kind of thing, or like grief, for
Ooh.
example, that's a real kind of in your gut type area for me anyway. And I'm just interested to know if is that maybe we'll research that. Maybe we'll bring the body barometer in for another
Hmm.
chat in another episode.
It could be a chakras kind of thing. I'm not
Mm.
familiar enough to assess that. It could be to do with the chakras and the
Yeah.
areas where you're feeling these things. Yeah.
Oh, it could be. It could be. Anyway, let's before we get too distracted and maybe talk about some more biscuits, we'll probably leave it there for another week, and we'll see you all soon for another episode.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Mission Imperfect.
Please visit the show notes for details on how to contact us and for any resources we may have on the topic discussed.
Until next time, keep being imperfectly you. No one does it better.